The wind sounds different when you're 120 feet in the air. Down on the ground, it's a noise, a nuisance that rattles windows and knocks over trash cans. Up here, strapped to a lattice of cold steel with nothing but a leather belt and my own grip keeping me from the pavement. The wind is a conversation. It tells you when to move. It tells you when to freeze. It tells you that you are small and the world is large, and that if you make a mistake, gravity doesn't negotiate. I tightened the bolt on the crossarm and the wrench heavy and familiar in my hand. My gloves were thick leather, worn smooth at the palms. Below me, the town of Oakhaven looked like a model train set someone had abandoned in the attic. Cars were specks. People were invisible. That was how I liked it. "Case you copy." Elias's voice crackled in my earpiece, cutting through the whistle of the gale. "I copy," I said. I didn't shout. I never shouted. The wind would just swallow it anyway. Doppler shows the front moving faster. That dark wall to the west isn't a suggestion. It's a promise. Finish the tie-in and get down. I looked west. The sky was the color of a fresh bruise, purple and black and swollen with rain. The air pressure was dropping so fast, I could feel it in my sinuses, a dull ache behind my eyes. This wasn't just a storm. It was a grid killer. "Copy," I said. 5 minutes. I worked methodically. Panic is for people who have a safety net. I didn't have one. I checked the tension on the line, secured the insulator, and double-checked my carabiners. My movements were slow, deliberate, efficient. I didn't waste energy on shivering, even though the temperature had dropped 20 degrees in the last hour. When I finally unhooked my safety strap and began the descent, the first fat drops of rain were hitting the steel rungs with metallic pings. By the time my boots hit the gravel of the substation lot, the sky had opened up. I stripped off my gear in silence, throwing the harness into the back of the truck. Elias was already in the cab, the heater blasting. "You cut that close," he said, handing me a thermos of coffee as I climbed in. "It's done," I said. I took the coffee. Black, bitter hot. "Dispatch has a ticket for us on the way back," Elias said, tapping the tablet mounted on the dash. "Service drop issue. Customer says the line is sparking near a structure. Priority 1 due to the weather." I looked at the address. The Bramble Inn, 422 Cedar Lane. "That's the old Miller place," I said. "Been empty for years?" "Sold last month," Elias said, putting the truck in gear. "Some lady from the city bought it. Thinks she can turn it into a B&B before the bank eats her alive. Inspector Vance has been sniffing around there all week." My jaw tightened. I let out a short breath through my nose and kept my eyes on the road ahead. Vance was a man who used a clipboard like a weapon. If he was involved, it wasn't a repair. It was an interrogation. "Let's go," I said, "before the wind takes the line down completely." The Bramble Inn was a sprawling Victorian monstrosity that had seen better decades, let alone days. The paint was peeling in long, sunburned strips, and the porch listed dangerously to the left. But as we pulled into the gravel drive, the first thing I noticed wasn't the house. It was the woman. She was standing on a ladder that had no business being on uneven, wet grass, trying to wrestle a heavy tarp over a section of the roof where the shingles were missing. The wind whipped her dark hair across her face, blinding her. Rain had soaked her through her clothes, heavy with water, and she was shouting over the wind at a man standing safely on the porch. "Vance." I opened the truck door and stepped out. The rain was torrential now, a curtain of gray noise. I walked toward the porch, my boots crunching on the wet gravel. I didn't run. Running invites mistakes. "Violation of Code 394. Vance was yelling, pointing a finger at her. He was dry, standing under the overhang. "You can't patch a structural leak with plastic, Ms. Flores. I'm citing you for this. It's temporary." she screamed back, fighting the tarp as a gust of wind tried to turn it into a sail. I'm just trying to keep the water out until the contractor comes. The ladder wobbled. One leg sank an inch into the mud. She gasped, grabbing the gutter to steady herself. I didn't say a word. I walked past Vance, who blinked at me in surprise, and stepped off the porch into the mud. I moved to the base of the ladder and planted my boots against the feet, locking it in place with my weight. I reached up and grabbed the side rail with one hand, steadying it. "Come down," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but she froze. She looked down, her eyes wide. They were brown, the color of wet earth, and frantic. "What?" she shouted over the wind. "Come down," I said again, looking directly at her. "The ladder is slipping. You can't fix this from up there." She hesitated, looking at the flapping tarp, then back at me. She saw something in my face, maybe the fact that I wasn't yelling, or maybe just that I wasn't moving, and she nodded. She climbed down, her movements shaky. When her boots hit the grass, she spun around, wiping rain out of her eyes. She was older than the girls I usually saw at the local bars, late 30s, maybe 40. She had fine lines at the corners of her eyes and a strength in her jaw that I liked immediately. She looked tired, bone-tired. "Who are you?" she asked, breathless. "Power company," I said. "Report of a sparking line." "It's around the back," she said, shivering. She crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together. "But Mr. Vance here says he's going to condemn the property if I don't fix the roof first." Vance stepped to the edge of the porch, sneering. "Safety hazard, Smith. You know the rules. If the structure is compromised, you can't energize the drop." I looked at the roof. Then I looked at the line running from the pole to the house. It was swaying violently, the weatherhead loose. Every time the wind gusted, sparks showered down onto the dry, dead ivy climbing the wall. "The roof isn't the hazard," I said, my voice flat. I pointed at the line. "That is, if that weatherhead pulls loose, it'll arc on the siding. This whole place goes up in smoke in 10 minutes. Vance narrowed his eyes. "I'm the inspector here, Smith. I say the roof is priority." I turned my back on him. I looked at Noah. She was watching me, water dripping from her nose, waiting to see if I was another man who was going to tell her what she was doing wrong. "Go inside," I told her. "Get warm." "But the tarp, I'll handle the line," I said. "The tarp won't matter if the house burns down." She stared at me for a second, searching for something. Then she nodded. "Okay." She walked up the steps, brushing past Vance without looking at him. When the door clicked shut, I turned back to the inspector. I stepped into his personal space. I didn't touch him. I didn't threaten him. I just stood there, 6'3" of wet lineman, smelling of ozone and diesel. "Get in your car, Vance," I said quietly. "You can't order me." "It's a hazardous site," I said. "I'm declaring a safety perimeter. If you stay, you're interfering with emergency utility work. I'll call the sheriff myself." He opened his mouth, closed it, and then huffed. "You fix that drop, Smith. But I'll be back Monday. If that roof isn't a code, I'm pulling the meter." He ran to his sedan, shielding his head with his clipboard. I watched him drive away, the taillights fading into the gray wash of the storm. I exhaled, looking up at the sparking wire. "Elias," I said into my radio. "Get the bucket." It took an hour to resecure the weatherhead and tighten the tension on the drop. The wind was brutal, shaking the bucket arm, but I moved with the rhythm of it. By the time I lowered myself back down, the sparking had stopped. The connection was solid. Noah came out onto the back porch. She had changed into dry clothes, jeans, and a thick gray sweater, but she still looked cold. She was holding 2 mugs. I don't have coffee, she said, her voice carrying over the wind. But I have tea, and it's hot. I walked over. I wiped my hands on a rag from my belt before I took the mug. Thank you. She leaned against the railing, watching the rain hammer the yard. He's going to shut me down, isn't he? He wants to, I said. I took a sip. Earl Grey. Not my usual, but it did its job. She shivered once, and without thinking, I tugged the cuff of her sweater down over her wrist, small and practical. She didn't pull away. She just wrapped both hands tighter around her mug. He gets a kickback from the developers if prime lots go up for auction. She let out a bitter laugh. Prime lot. This place is a money pit. My ex-husband told me I was insane to buy it. Said I didn't know a hammer from a hairbrush. I looked at her hands. They were wrapped around the mug, the knuckles red and chapped. There was white paint under her fingernails and a fresh scratch on her forearm. You got the tarp halfway up, I said. In a gale-force wind, most men I know wouldn't have tried. She looked at me surprised. I didn't get it finished. You tried, I said. That counts. I finished the tea in one long swallow and set the mug on the railing. The line is safe. You have power. But Vance is right about one thing. If water gets into the breaker panel in the basement, you'll have a short. You need to divert the runoff. I know, she said, her shoulders sagging. I need gutters. I have the materials in the shed, but I can't put them up alone. And I can't afford a contractor until the grand opening next month. I looked at the shed. Then I looked at the house. The storm was only going to get worse tonight. I get off shift at 6, I said. She blinked. What? I get off shift at 6, I repeated. I looked her in the eye. I'll come back. We can get the gutters up on the west side before the worst of it hits. You? Why? She looked baffled. You don't even know me. I know the grid, I said. And I know that if this house shorts out, I have to come back out here in the middle of the night to cut the line at the pole. I'd rather fix it now. It was a lie. Well, half a lie. I could have just cut the line and left her in the dark. That would have been protocol. But I looked at the paint under her nails and the way she stood her ground against Vance, and my breathing stalled for a beat. My eyes stayed on her hands a second longer than they needed to before I forced them away. I can't pay you, she said. Not utility rates. I like stew, I said. Smells like you've got some cooking. She stared at me, then a small, genuine smile broke through the exhaustion. Beef and barley. It's almost done. 6 o'clock, I said. I turned and walked back to the truck before I could talk myself out of it. For the next 2 weeks, my life fell into a strange, split rhythm. By day, I was high on the towers, battling the aftermath of the storm systems rolling off the Pacific. By night, I was at the Bramble. The first night, she set a bowl of beef and barley stew in front of me and nudged it closer like it was nothing. When I reached for my spoon, she quietly swapped it for one that wasn't bent. I didn't talk much. I didn't need to. Noah was a talker when she was nervous, filling the silence with chatter about guests she hoped to book, the history of the house, the color of paint for the trim. I learned to listen. I learned that she hummed when she was sanding wood. I learned that she rubbed her left temple when she was doing math in her head. I fixed the gutters. Then I fixed the porch railing. Then I rewired the flickering sconces in the hallway. It wasn't romance. It was rescue. She was drowning in a sea of deferred maintenance, and I was the raft. One Tuesday night, I was under the sink in the kitchen replacing a corroded P-trap. The air smelled of old copper and Noah's vanilla soap. She was sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by a mountain of receipts, tapping furiously on a calculator. Damn, she whispered. I paused the wrench in my hand. Problem. Vance, she said, her voice tight. He sent a new notice. He's demanding a structural engineer sign off on the foundation by Friday. Friday case. Do you know how much an engineer costs on 48 hours' notice? I slid out from under the cabinet and sat up, wiping grease off my hands. The foundation is fine. Stone and mortar. It's been here 100 years. Vance says there's a crack in the north corner. There's a hairline fracture in the parging, I said. Cosmetic. I checked it. She dropped her head into her hands. He's going to win. He's going to bleed me dry until I have to sell, and then he's going to laugh. I stood up and walked over to the table. I reached out, wanting to touch her shoulder to squeeze the tension away. But I didn't. I kept my hands in my pockets. My hands were rough, scarred, stained with work. They didn't belong on her soft gray sweater. He won't win, I said quietly. She looked up, her eyes wet. How do you know? Because you're not alone anymore. The words hung in the warm air of the kitchen. It was the most I had said about us, about whatever this arrangement was. She looked at me, really looked at me the way she had that first day on the ladder. The frantic look was gone, replaced by something softer, something that made my heart hammer against my ribs like a bird trapped in a cage. You should go home, she whispered. You've been working since dawn. You look exhausted. I'm fine. Case. She stood up. She was a foot shorter than me, but in that moment she felt tall. She reached out and took my hand, the one I was hiding in my pocket. She pulled it out. She turned it over, tracing the calluses on my palm with her thumb. My breath hitched. I went perfectly still. You're shaking, she said softly. Muscle fatigue. I lied. It wasn't muscle fatigue. It was her. Thank you, she said. For the sink, for the gutters, for showing up. It's just work, I said, my voice rough. No, she said. It's not. She squeezed my hand, then let go. Go home, Case. Get some sleep. I'll be here tomorrow. I walked out into the cool night air, my hand burning where she had touched it. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes before I turned the key, just staring at the light in the kitchen window. I waited until she turned it off and the upstairs light flicked on. I left the porch light on for her. I had wired it to a photo sensor myself, so she'd never come home to the dark. It was a small thing, but it was the only way I knew how to say what I couldn't speak. The midpoint came on a Thursday. I was at the yard loading coils of wire when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Noah. Just an image. A scanned letter from the city. Condemnation notice. Vacate within 72 hours. I stared at the screen. The blood drained from my face. 72 hours. That wasn't legal. That was a hit job. I drove to the Bramble. It was the middle of the day. I should have been at work. I didn't care. I found her in the garden, sitting on a stone bench, the letter crumpled in her fist. She wasn't crying. She was staring at the ground, her face blank. He found a clause, she said when she heard my boots on the grass. Subsection 44. If the property relies on a private utility spur that is deemed unstable, the city can evict for public safety. I sat down next to her. The spur isn't unstable. I fixed the drop. He says the pole is rotting. The one at the edge of the property line, he says it's a fall hazard. I knew that pole. Pole number 492. It was old cedar, yes. Weathered, but it wasn't rotting. I had climbed it 3 days ago to check the transformer. He's lying, I said. It doesn't matter, she said, her voice hollow. He filed the report. Unless I can get a certified utility inspection that clears it in writing from a senior technician by the hearing on Saturday, I'm out. I'm a senior technician, I said. You're a contractor for the co-op, she said. Vance said it has to be an independent audit, or someone willing to put their license on the line. I looked at her. I looked at the house she had poured her savings, her sweat, and her hope into. I'll sign it, I said. She shook her head. Case, if you sign off on a pole that falls, you lose your certification. You lose your career. Vance will make sure of it. He'll claim you falsified the report. It won't fall, I said. There's another storm coming, she whispered. Saturday, a nor'easter, winds up to 60. I looked at the sky. It was blue today, deceptively innocent. But I could feel the pressure drop. I'll sign it, I said again, and I'll reinforce it before the hearing. Case, no. She turned to me, grabbing my arm. I can't let you risk your job for my house. It's just a building. It's not just a building, I said. It's your life. And what about yours? She demanded. Why are you doing this? Why are you risking everything for me? The question hung there. 3 years ago, my wife died in a wreck on I-95. After that, I kept my world narrow. Work, sleep, repeat. No risks I didn't have to take. Then I watched you take one anyway. In the rain on a ladder that could have folded with Vance barking orders from safety, you didn't fold. I forgot what fighting looked like until I saw you, I said. And I'm not letting him take this place from you. I said it flat, no softness, just the truth I could stand behind. She looked at me, searching my face. Then slowly she leaned in. She rested her forehead against my shoulder. It wasn't sexual. It was the heavy, desperate weight of exhaustion seeking a place to land. I'm so tired, Case, she whispered. I didn't move. I didn't pull away. I just sat there being the rock while she breathed against my shirt. I got you, I said. Rest now. Saturday morning dawned gray and violent. The wind was already howling, stripping the leaves from the trees. The hearing was at 9 a.m. at the town hall. But first I had to secure the pole. I was up at dawn. I drove to the yard, unlocked the supply cage, and took what I needed: steel bracing struts, heavy-duty lag bolts, and a guy wire kit. I didn't log them out. I didn't have a work order. If I got caught, it was theft. I didn't care. I arrived at the Bramble at 6 a.m. The wind was gusting to 40 miles per hour. The pole stood at the edge of the ravine, swaying slightly. It looked solid to the untrained eye, but Vance knew enough to know that cedar softens underground. I strapped on my hooks. The wood was slick with rain. I climbed the gaffs, digging in with a satisfying thunk. The wind tried to peel me off the wood, but I leaned into the belt, moving upward. I installed the cross bracing first. Then I drilled the holes for the new guy wires. The drill whined a high-pitched scream against the roar of the wind. My hands were freezing, the knuckles white, but I didn't fumble. Precision is a habit, not a choice. I was halfway down, securing the anchors in the ground, when a black sedan pulled up. Vance, and behind him, a sheriff's cruiser. I didn't stop. I kept wrenching the bolt on the anchor, turning it until the wires sang with tension. "Get down from there," Vance shouted, jumping out of his car. "That's utility property you're trespassing." I finished the last turn. I stood up, unhooking my belt. I walked toward them, wiping rain from my face. "I'm an authorized technician," I said calmly, "performing emergency stabilization on a compromised asset." "You have no work order," Vance yelled. He turned to the deputy. "Arrest him. He's tampering with evidence." The deputy, a guy I went to high school with named Miller, looked uncomfortable. "Case, you supposed to be here." "The pole was a hazard," I said, looking at Vance. Inspector Vance filed a report saying it was imminent danger. I fixed it. It's secure now, rated for 100-mile winds. I didn't ask you to fix it, Vance spat. I wanted it condemned. You wanted public safety, I said, my voice low and hard. You got it. He stole those materials. Vance pointed at the struts. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a receipt. I had bought replacement parts online and paid for express shipping to the yard before I took the inventory. I wasn't a thief. I was a strategist. My personal property, I said. Donated to the grid. Vance turned purple. I'll have your license. I'll call your supervisor. Call him, I said. Tell him I just saved the co-op $20,000 in replacement costs and prevented a liability lawsuit. Vance stared at me, his chest heaving. He knew he was beat on the technicality, but he had one card left. The hearing? He sneered. You think this saves her? I'll find something else. The wiring inside, the plumbing. I'll find a violation if I have to tear the walls down myself. Noah's car pulled in then. She jumped out dressed in a sharp blazer and jeans, looking like a warrior. She walked straight to us. You won't find anything, she said, her voice shaking but loud. Ms. Flores. Vance smirked, ready to hand over the keys. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick binder. This is a full independent audit of the property conducted yesterday by state code enforcement. I paid for the rush fee. Vance froze. What? I called the state, she said. I told them I suspected local corruption and requested a senior auditor. He spent 6 hours here yesterday while you were filing paperwork. He cleared everything, the roof, the wiring, the foundation. She held up the document. It had the gold state seal on it. He also noted, she added, her eyes flashing fire, that the complaints filed by your office seemed frivolous and targeted. He's opening an inquiry into your inspection history, Mr. Vance? Vance looked at the document, then at the deputy, then at me. He looked like a balloon with the air let out. This isn't over, he muttered, backing toward his car. It is, I said. I stepped up beside Noah. Get off the property. Vance got in his car and peeled out, spraying mud. The deputy tipped his hat to me and followed. We stood there in the rain, the wind whipping around us. Noah was trembling, adrenaline crashing. You called the state, I asked. I couldn't let you do it all, she said, looking up at me. You were risking your job. I had to risk my money. I spent the last of the renovation budget on that auditor. You're broke, I said. I'm broke, she agreed. But I have my house. She looked at the pole gleaming with the new steel braces. And I have power. You have power, I confirmed. She turned to me. Rain ran down her face. She didn't wipe it. She kept her grip on the wrench and her eyes on me. Why did you do it? She asked again. Really? I didn't look away. My wife died 3 years ago, I said. After that, I stopped fighting anything that didn't force me to. Then I saw you on that ladder. I nodded toward the roofline. You were fighting. I remembered what that looks like. So I stepped in. That's it. She didn't say anything. She just reached out and took my hand again. And, she whispered. I feel it, I said. The storm passed. The inquiry into Vance turned up a dozen other cases of intimidation. He was suspended pending investigation. He still swung at the house from the sidelines. A certified letter showed up with his lawyer's letterhead, wrongful suspension, defamation threats of damages. He bragged about friends on the board and coming back. One afternoon, I pulled into the gravel drive and found her painting the white picket fence. Bunting hung from the porch posts. Black button-front work dress, old sneakers. Practical. She nodded once and kept painting. I stepped out in a plain gray t-shirt and jeans off the clock with a box and a folder. Did you hear about the letter? She asked. I heard. She tapped the brush once on the rim. He thinks he can sue his way back. He's promising he'll shut me down the second he's cleared. I set the folder on the porch step and held it there with my palm. That's why I'm here, I said. What is it? The kill shot, I said. Proof that follows money. I flipped it open. County bid tabs. Vendor lists that rotated names but kept the same addresses. Invoices that matched line for line across competing quotes. Checks routed through a shell LLC. A signed statement from a subcontractor who'd been frozen out after refusing to play along. And an email thread from public record releases Vance pushing preferred vendors right before he tagged properties and steered jobs. Bid, rigging, and kickbacks, I said. He didn't just bully people. He profited. How did you get this public records and a witness who got tired of being used? I said. Nothing hacked, nothing stolen. I tapped my notes, dates, request numbers, receipt copies. Copies already went to the county investigator and the state hotline this morning. Noah stared at it like it might bite her. Then she let out a breath, slow and shaky. You didn't have to do that. I don't have to, I said. I do what closes a problem. She set the brush across the rim of the paint can and wiped her hands on a rag. They're watching, she said, glancing toward the road. They'll see, I said. She studied my face for a long second, the way she did when she was trying to solve a math problem in her head. Then her mouth curved, not quite a smile, more like relief, trying to pretend it wasn't there. My husband never looks at me like that, she said, almost casually, like she was talking about the weather. I didn't react fast. I don't. I just held her gaze, like what I asked, like I'm capable, she said. Her voice went quiet on the last word, like I can hold my own. I nodded once, as if that was a fact that didn't require debate. Then he's missing out completely. For a beat, the wind moved through the bunting and made it flutter like small flags. Noah blinked hard. The emotion in her eyes wasn't loud, but it was there, glossy and real. She cleared her throat and picked the brush back up like it could save her from saying too much. You came to install the numbers. I came to make sure your opening doesn't turn into a spectacle, I said. I tapped the folder. And to give you leverage if Vance tries to crawl back. You're thinking he will, she said. Men like him don't quit, I said. They look for a different angle. She nodded, accepting that the way she accepted most hard truths. Then, without asking, she shifted the paint can closer to me and offered the brush handle. Hold the fence line, she said. Keep it straight. I don't trust my hand when I'm tired. I took the brush. Not because she needed me to paint, but because she asked me like I belonged here. I laid the next stroke clean along the top rail, the white covering the old cracks. Behind me, Noah opened the folder and started reading, her posture changing as she saw the evidence stack up. Tired didn't leave her face, but something steadier moved in underneath it. She didn't argue. She just went back to painting. And for the first time since I'd met her, the work looked less like drowning and more like building. 3 weeks later, the Bramble opened. It wasn't a grand gala. It was a community open house. The neighbors came, Mrs. Higgins from next door, the mailman, even the guy from the hardware store who had sold Noah the wrong tarp. I was there, but I stayed on the periphery. I was in the kitchen fixing a loose hinge on the pantry door because I couldn't help myself. I liked being useful. I liked the noise of people laughing in the other room, as long as I didn't have to be in the center of it. Noah found me there. She was wearing a green dress that made her eyes look like moss agate. She looked happy. You're hiding, she said, leaning against the doorframe. I'm fixing, I corrected. Leave the hinge case. Come out and have a drink. I'm not good at crowds. I know. She walked over to me. She took the screwdriver out of my hand and set it on the counter. But I need you out there. Why? Because someone asked me who did the restoration work on the electrical, she said. And I want to introduce them to my partner. I froze. Partner. In the business. She teased a small smile playing on her lips. Or whatever this is. She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. My ex-husband. He used to look at me like I was a project he never finished. Like I was something that needed to be managed. She stepped closer. She put her hands on my chest, right over my heart. You look at me like I'm the one holding the wrench, she said. Like I'm capable. You are, I said. He never looked at me like that, she whispered. I looked at her, at the paint still faintly visible under her fingernails, at the strength in her shoulders, at the way she had saved herself while I was busy trying to save her. Then he's missing out completely, I said. I didn't kiss her. Not yet. The kitchen was full of light and noise from the party, and I wanted our first time to be quiet. Instead, I took her hand. I interlaced our fingers, my rough skin against her smooth palm. I squeezed. She squeezed back. Ready? She asked. Ready, I said. We walked out of the kitchen and into the light together. Words are cheap. What counted was showing up. A hand on a ladder rail. A folder slid across a porch step. A bowl pushed closer.